Hey all, and welcome back to Fuzzy Ducks of Gaming, and a new video on the channel going over my attempt at a Phys conversion tornado shot build for around 40 to 50 divines. Now, this build has done all of the invitations except the feared, but that's mainly because I haven't had the money and just can't be bothered to buy all the bits and run all the content. So it's done all of the invitations out. It's mapped like a dream. I'm deathless in maps. It's done Cirrus, it's done Maven, and overall, I've really enjoyed the build, and I'm actually really happy with it, and it's performing way above expectations. So it has taken me probably a day's solid play to fine tune this build. I started off with a build that had okay DPS, but the budget was about 70 divines. And as I've looked into different things, the budget has come down and the DPS has gone up. So before we go any further, I just want to shout out Crouching Tuner's Guide on Max Roll because it gave me the final bit of the puzzle, so to speak, to get the build rocking and rolling, which is how to get Trinity procced on a Hatred build. We've done that, and that's kind of what pushes DPS from decent to good. So before we jump into the guide, there's a few things I want to cover very quickly. Firstly, you're going to be crafting every item yourself that's rare to get the build within a 40 divine budget. If you're not comfortable with fairly basic to intermediate crafting, it's probably not for you. There is going to be a section where I craft every item. So even if you know nothing about crafting, if you follow the steps, step by step, you will be able to do these items. If you're still feeling uncomfortable once you've seen that bit and you're still not sure, then maybe it's not for you, because I'm not going to be able to answer sort of hundreds of questions about crafts that might be messed up or why your build's not working. There is lots of working parts of this build, and you can need to get them all right for it to basically perform really well. And then lastly, I just want to very quickly mention the sheet defenses in POB. These are honestly nonsense. I've mapped from level 90 to 93. I've not died, and I've not even felt close to dying. I'm chiseling and alking all of my maps. I'm running super extra pack size with sextants. I'm doing all of the harvest, and I'm doing all of the essences, and I've not died yet. I've done every invitation, and I've died once to the Breach Lords, and it was my own fault because I stood in Esh's AoE attack, and then I got stunned by another one, and I died. Other than that, I've not taken a death on this character. You do need some player skill to be able to play this build. You can't just go into a map, stand there, and go like this and ignore everything that's going on, because you need to be keeping an eye out for big telegraphed attacks. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's talk through the build and how it works. First thing we're going to go through is the Tornado Shot gem, because if you get this part wrong, you're already gimping your damage by about 40%. You have to run Anomalous Tornado Shot, and it has to be quality to 20%. Now, this isn't a particularly expensive gem. It's between half a divine to a divine. But what this does is it converts all of the rest of our damage to another element. And essentially, this is what converts us fully into elemental. And it's also what allows us to run Trinity. If you just run normal Tornado Shot, you're only converting 40% of your damage to elemental. You're going to do way too much Phys and die to Phys Reflect. And just overall, you're going to do way less damage. Now, second thing to go over, this lightning roll on the bow is not an accident. You need T4 and upwards of either lightning or fire on your bow to make sure that Trinity procs. Now, you would think that if we're converting 60% to a random element and we're only converting 40 to cold, that would automatically hit Trinity. But you're using Hatred, we're doing increased Hatred effect. There's some nodes on the tree here that add Phys as extra cold. So it's not enough just to convert that 60%. You need to give it a little boost, which is why the bow has lightning or fire on it. So we'll talk through a few other things on the build. Taste of Hate is not necessarily mandatory, but I don't think you can get a better flask. It gives us physical damage from hits taken as cold damage. And like I've said, we don't have really any Phys mitigation, so this can be pretty huge. And it gives us Phys as extra cold. And again, that's why it's important that you get more damage on your bow of another element, because this is going to make it more and more difficult to proc Trinity if you don't. And then the only other thing to pull out before we go through all the gear is a Black Sun Crest. Now, I looked at including a Tornado Shot helm enchant, but they're going up and up and up as the days go on. And I think if people wanted to do this video, instead of paying 20C for this helm, which is what I paid, you're going to end up paying 8 divines for just a base with an enchant. If you wanted Black Suncrest and an enchant, at the moment, for a decently rolled one, it's about 15 divines. So I've just decided for an entry build into like the Phys conversion world, we're just going to go Black Suncrest. Now, this alone brings its own problems, and this is the last bit I'm going to go into before we just go over the gear and the gems in general. The helmet is a really, really useful slot in Tornado Shot builds to have rare because you can roll 2 big implicits on it. Mana reservation, efficiency of skills, and more importantly, reduced mana cost of attacks, and it's 20% upwards. So by running a Blackstone Crest, you do have to make a couple of compromises to make sure that your mana is manageable. So my mana at the moment is 6, and that's absolutely fine. I can just spam it, and I'm never going to run out. But there's 2 things that allow us to be able to do that. The first one is Divergent Inspiration. This is expensive. It's probably 2 to 3 divines, but it's a very important part of the build to make it feel comfy. It all falls within the budget, but it's something I don't think you can do without. And what this does is gives you 44% reduced mana cost to supported skills, whereas a normal inspiration, if we go in here, is 34%. So it gives you an extra 10%. Now, unfortunately, that on its own is still not enough for it to feel nice because your mana cost is going to be up at 10 to 12. And with Omni builds, you do struggle to get a big mana pool. So the way we're getting around the rest of it is we are allocating Dreamer on the Omniscience Amulet, which is a node over here. It's super cheap. It is, yeah, next to nothing. They're all just garbage oils. This gives you more mana regen, which doesn't really matter, and more importantly, 10% reduced mana cost of skills. So combining this inspiration with this here, you're pretty much getting to where that Helm enchant would have been. Now, yes, it would be nice to allocate like a damage notable on your Crystallized Omniscience, but I think it's much more important to get a comfy build. And it's very, very important to be able to spam Tornado Shot because you want to try and off-screen stuff. So what you're going to do when you map is you're not even going to look. You're just going to run and shoot, and everything's going to die before you even get there. If my mana cost was 10 or 12, and I've only got 70 mana, in fact, we'd have less because we wouldn't have the mana from the anointment, you're going to run out of mana. You want to be able to spam. So if you've got Harvest here, you want to be able to just go like this and stand there and spam Harvest. The only other thing to point out is we're not running any plus arrows because it just makes items so much more expensive. Like if I wanted this bow with 2 arrows, it's probably 100 divines to craft it. If I wanted this quiver with an arrow, it's probably 20 divines. If you've got the budget, try and get an arrow into at least your quiver because it is going to help you out. But I've played this build quite a lot. I'm absolutely loving how it plays, and I don't feel you need the extra arrows because we're going to run greater multiple projectiles in our links to make up for it. So with that out of the way, let's firstly go through the gem links and then we'll go through the gear. So the main 6 income recommend, Anomalous, get it into your head. Anomalous Tornado Shot has to be 20% quality. You want greater multiple projectiles. If you can afford Awakened, brilliant, because you're going to want it eventually. But it's like 20 to 30 divine, so normal is fine, 20-20. I would go with Awakened Elemental Damage with attacks. It's not mega expensive now. You don't have to buy one at level 5. You can just level it as you go, or you can go and buy the Harvest Beast that level your gems up. But getting to 5 is important because you'll see the bottom line is supported skills cannot be reflected, so we can ignore Ellie Reflect. Because we're converting all the damage from physical to elemental, we can ignore Phys Reflect as well. So the build is 100% Reflect immune. You've got your Divergent Inspiration, which again is super important. And then along with that, we're running critical damage support, and then we're running Trinity. In your helmet, you have to put your auras in. Don't put them anywhere else. The reason being, +1 to level of socketed gems. So instead of needing to buy an Enlightened level 4, we can buy a level 3 for dirt cheap, stick it in this helmet, and it will raise the level of that gem. Not only that, it will raise the level of your other gems. So if you add a 20 on a Hatred, it will go 22. Your Purity goes up, and your Grace goes up as well. So we'll go on to the Ballistas. Now, the reason it's 5 link, and that's because I can't yet afford another Divergent Inspiration, and going to a full-on 6 link without this mana cost is going to put your totems at about 14 mana, and we want to be able to spam them for 2 reasons. 1, we don't want to be able to worry about our mana. 2, it allows us to get Gale Force up in stuff like Harvest, so we can just literally sit there spamming Ballistas. Our Gale Force is 10, the Harvest pops, we then start attacking, and we've instantly got that 10 Gale Force. Once you can buy a second Divergent Inspiration, you can 6 link your bow up, and you can run 6 links in your Ballistas. So for your 5 link, it's again Anomalous Tornado Shot. This one only has 15%. I don't think it matters too much getting to 20. You're not losing that much damage, and you can't die from Totem Reflect. But obviously 20-20 would be better. You've got your Inspiration, which eventually you want to go Divergent. Ballista Totems. GMP, and then Focus Ballista. And then your 6th link, when you get it, is going to be Awakened to LE damage with attacks, because that again gives you immunity, so that means your totems don't die in Reflect maps. Now, socketed in here, but we'll move across to here because this would be taken up, is just a Flame Dash. I don't know why I haven't leveled it up. You want it leveled and qualitied. Precision, 21 would be better, but 20 is fine. And then a Vile Haste, only using the Vile version. Doesn't matter where these gems go. The only gems that matter are obviously your 2 6 links and your helmet. These 2 items, your gloves and boots, can be swapped around. And then in our gloves, we've just got a Sniper's Mark, Life Tap, and Mark on Hit. I don't run any guard skill because I don't feel there's any worth it when you haven't got any determination or armor, which is for another day. They need to bring out an evasion guard skill. But anyway, yeah, we don't run a guard skill. So we're going to go on to the gear that you need. As I said, there's going to be another section for crafting, so I'm just going to go through the mods that you want on the gear. So for the bow, you need 130% plus Phys damage. You need flat Phys, which you're going to get from an essence. You need lightning or fire damage, and then crit chance and attack speed. Crit multi would be good, but you can't guarantee it, so I would just assume you're not going to get it. The 2 rings, you either want triple attributes, life and non-channeling, or double attributes, chaos res, life and non-channeling. So the chest in the POB is going to be different, and we're going to go through why when we get to the crafting section. You've got 2 choices for chest pieces. If you want to do it cheap, you'd basically just do a chest with life, suppression, resistances, just a bog standard 6-link chest. You may have to link it yourself because you want to get life fractured on it, but overall the cost of the chest should not be too extortionate, probably like 2 to 3 divines if you wanted to go cheap. If you wanted to get some Phys taken as, there's 2 ways of doing it, but you're probably then talking maybe 5 divines to complete your chest, but it's worth it if you want a bit more survivability. So the stats you want are life, spell suppression or lots of resistances, elemental ailments, and then Phys taken as. Now, one option that we're going to go through in crafting is you can unveil the bigger elemental ailments, which then makes your boots craft much, much cheaper because we don't have to spam lots of loathing essences. But we will come on to this in the crafting section of the video. But in terms of your stats of what you want, look at the POB. There's 2 chests in there. One is the one that costs us a bit more because we're going to go for elemental ailment and Phys taken as elemental. And the other one is cheaper where we're just disregarding the Phys taken as LE. Now, one thing I want to go through is the gloves because people are going to find the implicits a bit weird. You cannot get any more Phys converted to cold on your build because it potentially bricks your Trinity. So don't go looking for Syndicate gloves that have got physical converted to cold, and don't roll the implicit that converts it. The more you convert, the more difficult it's going to be for Trinity to proc, and we haven't got the flat damage that makes it so that scaling cold damage is better than slotting in Trinity. So I would recommend for your implicits, for your Exarch, go attack speed if you can only afford greater. If you can afford to go grand or push a greater up a level, I would go rage on hit, or intimidate is also good. For your Eater, I would go spell suppression because it makes getting the suppression on your gear less mandatory, and because we're running a unique helmet, that's 1 slot where we can't get suppression. If you've already got suppression, you get things like accuracy, you could get exposure, but again, because we're most of the time doing sort of a 50-50 damage, exposure is not a huge DPS boost, but if you don't need the suppression, I'd go cold exposure. The helmet, as I said, is a Black Sun Crest. If you don't have an enchant, they're really cheap to buy. I had this one drop, but I looked at a similar one on trade with 13% minimum for each, and they were like 20 to 50 chaos. Don't buy a bad roll one. Get a roll with at least, I would say, 36% in total. Your amulet is obviously crystallized omniscience. You may as well put some attribute modifier catalyst on it, even though it only gives you 3 attributes. There's nothing else we can do with it. And as I said, you're allocating Dreamer. The belt is a synthesized intelligence, dex, or strength base, and with the catalyst modifiers on it goes to 18%. When you roll this, you either want double attributes, but be aware you can only roll strength naturally on a belt, and ideally you want an open prefix to craft LE damage with attacks, or even increased armor and evasion. And then your boots, you need around 55% combination ailment avoidance between your implicit and your boots, and then you want movement speed and life. One thing I do find works better is if you buy Anomalous Grace and you get it up to 20%, that gives you 2% chance to avoid elemental ailments. It seems trivial, but it just means you're not going to spend a silly amount of essences to make sure you hit like 35% with your Essence of Loathing. So even though it might cost a divine, I don't think it does, but if it did, I still think it'd be worth it because you're going to save money in the long run. So if you take away the fact that you've got 2% from Grace, you're going to get 20 from the tree, so we need to find 78. You're going to get 25 on your chest, so we then only need to find 53 on the boots instead of 55. And I've only got a greater mod here. So basically, you just need to get 53% in total on your boots, and you are suppress capped. And the Quiver, there is a ton of different mods we can get on it. But you want any combination of T1 Phys damage, high crit multi, high projectile speed, and then when you've got an open suffix, we can guarantee life and damage of bows. As you can see, I got super unlucky with my slams, but we'll go through the crafting later on. And then we'll just quickly run through the flasks. So we have a Quicksilver flask, and I like reduce effect to curses. You could put something like attack speed on it, or movement speed if you wanted to just go more DPS orientated. We have a bleeding life flask, taste of hate. We got a jade flask with increased evasion, and then we have a diamond flask with increased crit. But that's it. It's fairly straightforward. Now into the jewels. So the jewels I'm running, it's actually quite expensive and not that great. So I've gone for Prismatic Heart, Sadist, and Disorientating Display, but we don't allocate Disorientating Display. Honestly, this is too expensive. This costs about 3 divines, and there are cluster jewels that you can get cheaper that give more damage. So actually, you should see a slightly better performance if you follow the POB. And we'll go through, actually, we might as well touch on that cluster jewel now. The jewel that you want is Arcing Shot, which is a bow cluster, 8 passive. You want Arcing Shot, Martial Prowess, Tempered Arrowheads, and then you don't take Tempered Arrowheads. And as an alternative, if these are too expensive, you can go Arcing Shot, Martial Prowess, and Calamitous. Now, Calamitous is good. It gives you LE damage. It gives you ailment effect. But what it will do with that cluster is it will put Martial Prowess here. So if you want it, you got to spend 2 more points. I wouldn't. I would just take the Calamitous and the Arcing Shot. These at the moment for both clusters are well under a divine. So along with the cluster jewel, you're going to run a Lion-Ice Fall just to get all these juicy bow nodes. We'll run through the tree separately in a minute. For the Watcher's Eye, I'm running a cheap one, which is just attack damage with precision. If you've got more money, you want crit chance with hatred. Works the best because we do struggle a little bit with crit. Getting that crit chance or hatred will probably put your crit chance at 100%. Just do not get Phys converted to cold when affected by hatred, because again, you're going to brick your Trinity. In terms of normal jewels, it's up to you, but you're going to need to get a Corrupting Blood jewel. So I've just gone for anything that was a divine or under. So I've gone for life, damage of bows, and attributes. And then we have a Brutal Restraint because I need to get Onslaught. Eventually, when you've got money, you want to buy an Onslaught and hit Ring, and you'd then get a Lethal Pride in here. But for now, in a budget version, you want Brutal Restraint. You have to have, because it's kind of the reason we run it, Onslaught on kill for 8 seconds. It just makes mapping amazing. You don't have to worry about any other form of Onslaught. And then outside of that, there's tons of good mods. You've got Crit Chance. We have Dexterity. We have Maximum Life. We've got Projectile Damage. Phys is extra colder. So we didn't want any extra, but 1 or 2 of these 5% are not going to kill you. It's the conversion you don't want rather than the extra. So there's loads of good mods you can get on a Brutal Restraint. This is the jewel that I had on my budget character, and it cost me 31 chaos. And then down here, we just have a jewel again with just lots of stuff that benefits the build. So I've got attack speed, accuracy, LE res, and life. Just have a look at what you need to finish your build off before you go getting jewels. The idea would be you get all your gear ready, you get your tree done, and then look where you are. And let's say this was me and I didn't have jewels in. I'd be like, well, my cold res is not quite LE weakness capped, so I'm going to go and get something with cold res, or I actually want some chaos resistance, or I just want to concentrate on life, or my attack speed looks a little bit low in offense. Use the jewel sockets to kind of top up and finish the build. Okay, so now let's go on to the tree. Apologies for the Sergog camera angle. My cat is still on my chair, so I've got to stand up. So I'm not going to go through the whole tree because it's going to be in the POB. I just want to go through the masteries because they're really important. So if we go here, we can get Culling Strike for 1 point, which seems like a no-brainer. There aren't many points that can give you that much DPS. You need increase and reductions to projectile speed applied to damage. It's huge. You're going to need Precision Reservation. Here it's up to you. Crit Multi is probably the best. If you find your cold ailment effect is not quite there, you could take effect of non-damaging ailments. But for single target damage, I think a critical strike multiplier can't really be beat. And then you need grace, reservation, efficiency here. Auras from your skills have 10% increased effect on you. We've already got a few buffs that add effects of auras, and our auras give us a lot of damage. So this is actually a big DPS boost. It should be between 6 to 8% more DPS depending on your gear. Here is where we get the 40% converted to cold. So then that means with our gem that gives us 60%, then that gives us the 100% conversion that we need. And then that's it at this stage. In the POB, there might be a few more masteries. So you might have 5 strength per allocated mastery here, or 5% increase attributes, whatever's more. But this is kind of the tree at this stage of the build. And then what I would look to do for the next 3 points is go here to get our crit up even more, especially if you don't have a crit hatred watcher's eye. And then just for ascendancy, this is really up to you. I think far shot benefits the build better because in mapping, far shot obliterates screens, whereas if you don't have far shot, the stragglers might not get killed off the edge of the screen. However, focal point is really good for bossing. I think if you are generally using this for a mapper and every now and again you're going to kill a boss, I think gathering winds, ricochet, endless munitions, and far shot is the best way to go. I've avoided forbidden jewels because they're just ludicrously expensive at the moment for Deadeye. You're talking probably, if you can even find them for sale, 50 divines for the set. They are nice, but at that price, they're probably the last thing that you want to add to the build, except maybe a headhunter or a mage blood. So we're just going to go over a few more bits of the build before we jump into the crafting section. I wanted to put that last in case people didn't want to watch that, then they don't have to then fast forward to the end of the video to see the rest of the guide. So map mods, what do I run, what do I not run, and what can't the build run? So it can essentially run every single map mod once you've got all your damage converted to elemental and you've got your awakened elemental damage with attack gems. We've got a tiny bit of mana on hit from the tree. That's enough to sustain in no leech maps. So there isn't any map mods you can't run. The only two I avoid because I don't want to die is minus max res, and I really don't like less effective auras because it really affects our damage and our survivability. So I tend to not run those two map mods. You can run them, you'll get through the map, but then you may take a death if you get unlucky and get hit by quite a big hit. In terms of Pantheons, I run Lunaris for mapping just for extra speed and a bit more survivability. And then I run Aberrath because I run Exile altars, so I need the Burning Ground immunity. For bandits, we're obviously killing all. 2 skill points is absolutely huge. Other than that, I just want to go through the upgrades that you can make on the build if you want to push it further. And then we're just going to go through the general playstyle of the build and how to get the most out of it and hopefully stay alive. So in terms of upgrades, due to Deadeye Forbidden Jewels at the moment being really expensive, I think another good option if you want to use Forbidden Jewels is to get Avatar of the Chase from the Raider and then buy an Onslaught on Hit ring. Now these rings are 15 to 20 divines for a base, but they make the build so much better, especially in things like Sanctum. As soon as you hit a guard with your ring, you've got Onslaught. It just makes you so quick. Avatar of the Chase is a really good mod, and the jewels aren't mega expensive. It gives you a lot of extra Onslaught effect, so you're going to get a lot more movement speed, a lot more attack speed, and it gives us 10% more chance to evade attacks, so that just adds to our grace. Next upgrade I'd look to make is a Hatred Crit Chance Watcher's Eye. A decently roll one's about 10 divines. If you can now cap crit, you could probably looking at maybe dropping the Lion Eyes and looking if a double cluster or one large cluster and 2 mediums is better. Now you need to check in POB if this improves your DPS, but you'd just be looking to slot a couple of medium projectile clusters into the build and just see if it improves the damage. If it doesn't, stick with Lion Eyes. Another option for your Watcher's Eye if you do want to spend money is you get the Crit Chance Hatred Watcher's Eye, and you get that combined with the Grace extra chance to evade Watcher's Eye, because again, that combined with the Raider Onslaught is probably going to push us to evade cap. You can obviously push the limits of your tiers for your implicit, so your Exarch and Eater mods. And then lastly, Awakened GMP is a big boost to the build. It is an expensive jewel, but it gives you an extra arrow, and it also has less effect of the less damage that you have on your multiple projectiles. They're kind of the upgrades that I would look. And after that, I think the build is kind of good enough to just slap a Headhunter or a Mage Blood on, and then you can just do whatever content you want to do. Outside of Headhunter and Mage Blood, I think the other upgrades are going to be a +2 bow, which can be really expensive. And if you do go +2, you're realistically going to have to go a pure Phys bow, because it's even harder and more expensive to try and get one with Big Ellie as well. And then again, your Quiver, you can look to get a really good +1 arrow quiver. There's obviously other things you could do. You could like double corrupt your items and things like that. But outside of like insane stuff, that's kind of what I would go for upgrades. And then lastly, before we close out the video, I'm just going to talk about playstyle. And it's all about speed. You will be killing everything on screen and off screen if you just run around constantly hitting tornado shot. And that's the way you're going to stay alive. We don't have a ton of defenses because we move so quick. A lot of the attacks in the game are telegraphed to hit you where you are at the moment. If you keep moving, you're never going to get hit by stuff. As I say, I've mapped deathless so far. I'm sure I will take the odd death. It's unavoidable on this sort of character. But it feels super, super comfy considering the really low sheet defenses that it gives us in POB. For map bosses, you shouldn't really have any issues. Just drop some totems. The map bosses will die in a second or two. If you decide you want to do invitations, you are probably going to take a death or two, unless you've got such big DPS that you're melting everything in like 2 seconds. In these sort of fights, I like to try and keep my distance, make sure your totems stay up, and just move fairly regularly. Just don't stand still for too long because there's more chance you're going to get hit by something that's got a chance to kill you. But even if you play kamikaze and you just stand there and attack things, most invocations you're going to be able to get through anyway. So that's kind of how I play the build. If you really, really didn't like it when you've tested it because you just don't like not having any Phys mitigation, you could try and run Determination. The issue with that is you probably need to change your gear to Armour and Evasion. Then it makes it much, much harder to roll spell suppression. And a lot of our crafting, we're relying on rolling spell suppression on the gear. On Armour and Evasion gear, it makes it much more difficult. Other than that, that's kind of everything I wanted to go through. I'm happy to answer any questions in the comments. So we'll jump into the crafting section. So now is the time for the crafting tutorial. This is going to be very long because I want to make sure I cover it in enough detail. Because of this, I've timestamped each item so that if you're only interested in certain items, you can have a look. If you're not interested in crafting at all, you can just skip to the end. However, I think if you're not 100% sure how to get these items as they appear in the build, I'd recommend watching it. So we're going to start with the bow, because in the last video, I just did one bow and I said, buy this fractured base because that was the way I did it. And then obviously the prices went to the moon. What I'm going to do this time is give you 5 different fractured bases that you can buy. All at the moment are 50 chaos or less. And there are a lot of them available. So even if a lot of people tried to play the build, there's going to be lots of fractured items available. And obviously these are going to keep dropping and getting listed as well. They may go up. It may be that instead of 10 chaos, this base is 100 C. It's still not an issue. You're still going to be able to craft your bow for a decent amount of money compared to buying it on trade. So the 5 bases that we're interested in is either fractured T1 or really high T2 Phys damage. We want T1 attack speed. We want increased Phys damage. I'll go for 140%. This is the easiest craft to do. This is the most straightforward one and probably the cheapest one. This is what I'd recommend you do. We have T2 or above Fractured Fire. Again, cheap and affordable. And we have T2 Fractured Lightning. So the Fire and Lightning crafts are going to be exactly the same. So we'll cover those off in one. So we're going to go through how to craft each of these. So we're going to start with the Phys damage one because that is the easiest craft. So with all these bows, we're looking for the same stats on the bow at the end of the day, but depending on what fractured base you buy, may vary the tier of what you aim for on the item. So we have the Phys percentage base we're going to work with first. First thing you want to do on all your bases is you want to get the quality up to at least 28%. So you're going to get perfect fossils and you're just going to roll them on the bow. We hit 30 first time. Brilliant. But 28 or more I'll be happy with because that is going to increase the Phys damage even more. So once we have that, it's then a case of crafting the item. Now we've seen from the in-game bow, what you're looking for, ignoring the crit multi, is 1 LE damage roll, Phys, percentage Phys, crit chance, and attack speed. So we're going to go back in here and we're going to explain what you're going to do. So for this bow, you are crafting with Essences of Contempt. Essentially, all you're looking to do is hit T3 of either fire or lightning with an open suffix. It then costs 4 divines and 2 exalts and the bow is finished. So you're essentially just going to roll with these and we've hit it straight away. So we got super lucky. We've hit 1 essence and we've pretty much finished the bow. If you do happen to roll just attack speed or just crit chance, you can finish the bow really cheap, but it is very unlikely to do it. So with this one, we've hit our lightning and we've hit T2 attack speed. So what we're going to do is craft on our critical chance with attributes. And then with this, you'd then just slam your last suffix and hope for crit multi or prod speed. So we will slam the suffix and we've got cold resistance. Doesn't matter, the bow's finished. We've got a 580 physical DPS bow with the Ellie roll that we wanted, 1.6 attack speed, 7.9 crit. So I'm going to do another example of this because obviously you're not going to get that lucky. What I want to do before we do that, because this is kind of the finished bow that you'd be looking at, actually, we'll remove the cold because you would have to multi-mod, so you wouldn't have a spare mod. I'm going to copy the item into the POB for the build. So the bow I have in my build is this bow here, which is similar, but I slammed crit multi because I crafted it in the same. I got lucky. What I've put in here is a bow that is much more physical DPS that I crafted on my first attempt at this build. So this bow is 620 physical DPS. It's got T1 attack speed. It's got Phys, Hybrid Phys, and Crafted Phys. And as you can see, compared to my other bow, which is less physical DPS, the DPS difference is massive. So you're looking 1.59 million for my pure Phys bow, and then 1.88 for this bow here. So we obviously hit that craft super lucky, but let's undo and let's roll again. So you're going to be spamming your Essences of Contempt. Again, you're looking for T3 Lightning, Tier 3 Fire with an open suffix. Again, if you get lucky and hit attack speed or crit, you've made your craft much cheaper. So we've done it again. We've hit T3 Lightning. We've hit big high rolls on our Essence. So here is where you just finish the craft. So you do prefixes cannot be changed. You scour the bow. We've now got our prefixes. You're then going to do can have up to 3 crafting modifiers. You're then going to craft attack speed on the bench for an Exalt. And then you're going to craft critical strike chance and attributes again for an Exalt. And your bow is finished. So we now have a 590 PDPS bow with some elemental damage that will hold up really well. So that's bow 1 out of the way. That's how you craft it. Spam until you get T3 lightning or fire. Prefixes cannot be changed, scour, multi-mod. Job done. So before we go any further and into the next craft, I'm going to start talking about tags on items and on affixes on items. So I just quickly wanted to explain what that meant. Really, for this video, you just need to know about the cannot roll attack mods modifier because you're going to be using it quite a bit. Essentially, all it does is a suffix that you craft, and it means if you annul, you can't annul something with an attack tag because you have cannot roll attack modifiers on the item. So if you want to know what they are, you can just go into Craft of Exile. I've gone to bows, and you can see what attribute or what affix has what tag. If you wanted to just look at all of the non-attack ones, you can just click non-attack here, and then it will score out everything that has an attack mod. So the next quiver is going to be talking about trying to get a non-attack mod as a suffix, and you can just look at all of them here just by clicking non-attack. And then the other way to check if you didn't want to go in Craft of Exile is you can just go to your item, hold Alt, and it will tell you. So in the next craft, we're going to be talking about trying to get a suffix without an attack tag. So if we look here, Global Critical Strike Multiplier does not have an attack tag. It has just damage and critical. But everything else, attack speed, crit chance, and all of our damages has an attack tag. So now we're going to go and we're going to craft the bow with the flat fractured physical damage. Now this one is slightly more complicated, but I am going to explain it step by step. And there is a very specific outcome that we're looking for. So you have to be more careful when doing this craft because you're going to need to check the mods on the bow. Essentially what we're looking for is we're going to roll with Essences of Anger or Essences of Wrath. And what we want is 2 prefixes and 2 suffixes. So the 2 prefixes are going to be Flat Phys and your Flat Fire. For suffixes, you need either crit chance or attack speed. I would just go for tier 3 or it starts getting much more expensive. And we don't want the 4th mod that we roll to have an attack tag because we want to deterministically remove it. So what this simulation does in Path of Exile is I'm saying I want either crit strike chance or attack speed. I also need it to have 2 suffixes and 2 prefixes max, and it can't roll 3. And I need it to have a maximum of 3 attack modifiers. So this essentially means it'll have 3 attack modifiers, 1 non-attack modifier, but all the mods we're asking for have attack tags on it. So we're just going to start this simulation, and what it's going to do is just really quickly craft tons and tons of items. So this bit here is showing how many items it's crafted. It's all recorded down here, what's happening. So it's done this many crafts, and it's saying we've had this many successes with this percentage success, and this is the amount of essences per success, essentially. And we don't need to do anything once we've got our base. We can deterministically craft it from there. So if we stop at 5,000, it's saying it's a 1 in 39. You'd really need to go for like tens of thousands to get it accurate, but it's going to be within 2 essences. and it's 50 essences for a divine for angers. So for less than a divine in essences, and the base was about 10C, we've hit the bow base that we need. So if we go into items, we're going to show an example here. So we've hit our 2 prefixes, and we've hit a crit chance on this one, which is T3, which is kind of the average you're going to hit. And then we've hit dexterity. So since this is the first one that would have returned, we're going to move this over to the emulator, and I'm going to show you how to craft it from here. So once you get to this stage, you've got 2 options. You can just try and annul off this dexterity on its own. It's a 1 in 3. And then if you fail, you're then going to have to craft again for your, let's say, 0.8 divines worth of essences. The other option is to craft cannot roll attack mods. This costs a divine, and this is where it can get expensive if RNG decides it hates you. Because what we need to do is then annul, and we can only annul off one of these 2. All these mods are safe. We cannot brick our big mods. It's just the fact that because we need to annul, it could just annul cannot roll attack mods. You're then going to have to craft it back on, and it could annul it over and over again if you get unlucky. But I'm looking at average costs of crafts. It's the only way to really do it, and that's 2 divines, because if you fail, you'll succeed the next time on average. So we'll go and annul, and it did remove our cannot roll attack mod, so we'll stick it back on. We'll craft. It's done exactly the same again, and it's done it again. So that was unlucky. It cost us 4 rolls to do it, which is 4 divines, and now we need to spend another 2. However, the rest of the craft has been cheap. So this bow would be 7 divines, and that's with getting unlucky. You'd 6 socket and 6 link it for about 1.5 divines. So for 8.5 divines, you're going to have a bow with T1 fire, T1 fizz, crit chance, attack speed, and fizz damage. So now what you're going to do is can have up to 3 crafted modifiers. You're then going to go and put your attack speed on there for an exalt on the crafting bench. And then you're going to roll flat physical damage on a crafting bench as well. Again, just a normal flat fizz for an exalt. We're going to go down here, fizz damage, T1 for an exalt. We hit a very low tier, but that's your bow finished. And it's only 500 physical DPS, but we get a lot of LE DPS. And that still scales really well. Even though we convert in our fizz, we do get lots of increased elemental damage from gems and tree. So this will still end up being a good bow. And to show that, we'll bring it into path of building against our other bows. So we're just going to put 28% quality on it. So we plugged it into POB. This is the bow I had on the character. And I've removed the crit multi because you're never ever going to hit that. It's super, super unlikely to even get to the scenario where you can hit it. So this is 1.788 million. We go down to the spine bow just crafted, and it's pretty much exactly the same DPS. So I'm not going to go over the fractured LE crafts because they're actually way too expensive. Essentially, the process is the same as the previous craft, but it's the other way round. So we don't have the fractured fizz, so we need to force it, which means you need to use contempt essences, which are like triple the price of wrath and anger essences, and the process is the same. So I would never recommend it unless the only reason you would do that is if the 2 fractured bases we've just discussed are more than 3 divines, which is very, very unlikely. So the last one we're going to go through is fractured attack speed. Again, this is more expensive than the other 2 methods by about 2 divines. So if the other 2 bases are under 2 divines, go for one of these 2 methods. If there's nothing available and you still want your bow, your next best way of doing it is either T1 fractured attack speed or T1 fractured crit. The process is the same. It's just if you have fractured attack speed, you craft crit and vice versa. So we're doing this and it's very similar to the last craft, but we're using contempt essences. So the way we do this one, fractured attack speed base, contempt essences, we're looking for either T3 fire or T3 lightning. We only want 2 prefixes and 2 suffixes. And we only want 3 attack modifiers max. And we're doing the same thing again. We're going to attack modifiers can't be rolled. And we're going to try and annul the item off. So I've already done the simulation just so we don't have to go through it. And it is expensive. It's 1 in 58 to do it. Now the issue with something like this is it's a 1.7% chance. So the variance is really high. So it wouldn't be that unusual if it took you 90 essences, which is 4.5 divines. Which is why I say unless the previous 2 fractured bases are extortionate, this method is going to be more expensive. So we'll just stick this item over to the emulator and you basically do exactly the same as we did in the last craft. You do cannot roll attack mods and then you're going to try and annul off cold resistance. So we did it first try this time and then you're doing exactly the same again. And then again, you're going to stick your crit chance of attributes and you're going to do your flat physical damage. So as I say, this method is more expensive and you're going to basically end up with exactly the same bow. However, your quality of life might feel a little bit better if you go for a T1 Fractured attack speed base, but overall, the DPS on your bow is going to end up pretty much exactly the same, except it's much more expensive to craft than the previous two methods. Now, the last option that you can look at, you may need to know a little bit more about crafting, is you can look for a bow that you can finish off by either deterministically removing a mod or getting a lucky annul. So the search I'm doing is fire damage or local damage, which you do a count of 1 to do one or the other, and physical damage local, and then count again of 1 of crit chance or attack speed. And I'm looking for a bow where I could annul off things, or maybe I can deterministically remove them because I don't have an attack tag. The item I wanted to look at, which I've actually just bought off trade, is this one here. It's got T1 physical damage, T1 fire, and T1 crit chance and dex. If we could get rid of the dex, this is ready to multi-mod. And as it turns out, we can get rid of it deterministically. Critical strike chance, fire damage, and phys damage all have an attack tag. We have an open suffix, so we do cannot roll attack mods and a null, and we've got a 50-50 chance of getting rid of dex. The only other thing it could do is remove the crafted mod we've just put on, so then we just craft it back, and we do the same again until it hits. As I say, the odds are 50-50, so the average cost of completing this successfully is 2 divines. So that would give us a base that cost us 3 divines. We're then multi-modded for 2, chuck in a couple of exalts on it, and we've got our end game bow for just over 5 divines. So let's go into POE. Now, I don't have a ton of exalts, divines, so I basically have to get this to work first try, because I'm then going to have to buy the exalts to slam. So we have it here. So you're going to go over to your crafting bench. Now, just double check that they have all got attack mods, and they have attack, 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 attribute, cannot roll attack modifiers, annul, and it got rid of the dex. So now we've got our base that's ready to go. So can have up to 3 crafted modifiers. I'm going to go and buy some exalts, and we'll finish the bow. Of quality to buy up to 20. At some point, you'd want to hill it craft it to 30. So we're going to go on. We're going to do our attack speed. And then we're going to do our phys damage. And that's the bow finished. So let's just quickly plug this into POB. So the horror arch bow is what we had before at 1.78. If we go down to this new bow, it's way better. This bow is comfortably better than the build I'm already using. And it was 7 divines to get this endgame bow, which you would be able to sell for a pretty penny, I would think. So now we're going to go and talk about the chest piece. I would recommend crafting if you want a really, really good endgame chest. Now, it's a bit variable in how much it costs. If you get lucky, it's 3 to 4 divines. If you get very, very unlucky, it could be upwards to 10 divines. But what you're going to end up with is a chest with T2 life, spell suppression, T1 chaos resistance, unveiled elemental ailments, and then physical taken as Ellie. So we're going to go through the process of crafting. So the base is cheap. You just need a fractured T2 dex base, and we can start going. Don't use armor and evasion because it's much, much harder to roll suppression, which means the cost goes up insanely. So the first thing you want to pick is, what suffix do you want to force onto your chest? I picked chaos resistance, so I used chaos resistance essences. If you wanted to force like T1 strength and hope that you roll dexterity, you could do that. Just put on whatever suffix you want to guarantee on the item. Then what you're looking to do is roll your chaos resistance essences until you hit spell suppression, another suffix, and 1 open prefix. You don't need to have 2, just an open prefix. Now, the last suffix, don't be too greedy about it, because if you decide, oh, I want tier 2 resistances or tier 2 dex, you can be rolling for 4, 5, 6 divines to hit it. The odds to hit this with any random suffix is about 20 essences, and they're about 6 to 7 C each. So you're talking 140 essences to get to this point. So don't be picky about what your 4th mod is, which is why I'll just put like a random tier 5 mod on there. Once you get to this point, your chest is finished. And unless your Veiled Chaos that we're going to do fills the mods, these are always going to be safe. So at this point is where it starts getting expensive. So you need to do suffixes cannot be changed. And then we're going to Veiled Chaos. So the odds of a Veiled Chaos to brick your item in terms of filling the items up is 3 out of 10. So what we're going to do is Veiled Chaos. If we do brick it, I'll go through what you need to do for the next steps. So we didn't. It's just got 2 prefixes. So now we go to the next step of the craft. Here, we need to block either spell block or attack block by crafting, because this blocks one of the high weighted options for veiling that we do not want to see. Then when you unveil, you've got a very, very high chance of unveiling either percentage life or ailment avoidance, and a good chance of getting your ailment avoidance. So we're going to unveil, and we hit the craft that we're looking for. So for this particular example, we rolled our chest for about half a divine's worth of essences, maybe a bit more. We spent 2 divines, locking. We've then veiled chaos, unveiled, and we finished the chest. So all you would do is unveil your elemental ailments, and then you're going to craft Phys taken as. So if everything goes in your favor, and you are odds on to do all these things that I've said, if everything goes in your favor, this is what it's going to cost to craft the chest, which is next to nothing. However, there are steps that could go wrong, which then make it more expensive. So we're just going to go over the scenarios where you do have to do something slightly differently. So here's our endgame chest. T2 life, unveiled ailment avoidance and stun avoidance, T1 chaos resistance, T4 suppression, some lightning resistance, and Phys taken as. So let's go back a few steps, and what we're going to do is veiled chaos until it fills the item. Now it is, like I said, more unlikely to fill it. So this, if it happens, is unlucky. If it happens twice in a row, it's insanely unlucky. As you can see, it's very rarely doing it. Now I'm sure it is 3 in 10 because I ran it through a simulator, but here it's looking like it's never going to do it. So there we go, it's filled the prefixes. So what do we do here? Well, we still have the chance to actually unveil our elements, in which case you might just say, I'm going to forego the Phys taken as, I'm going to keep my chest because I don't want to spend a potential 2, 4, 6 divines doing it again. So let's unveil first and see what it offers us. So it hasn't. So here it's offered us all junk. So what we're going to need to do to save the chest is just to null off one of the prefixes. If we null the suffixes, we have to start again. However, we're going to need to do suffixes cannot be changed even if we annul. So even if we miss the annul, it's then just 20 odd essences to get back to where we were before. So as you can see, actually missing your veiled chaos is fairly rare. Then you've still got a chance to just carry on from here. And we did, we annulled off a prefix. So from here, you basically go back to the suffixes cannot be changed step. And this is where if you get unlucky, like I said, it might cost you 6, 8, 10 divines to craft, because we've already missed our unveil once. And then we're going to need to again do our veil chaos. Again, it could fill the mods. It didn't. So now we can block again. So it's going to be spell or attack block. And then we unveil again. And then we've got our ailments, chest finished. That's how you do it. It's really, really simple. And I do think, even if you end up spending 8 divines on the chest, I think it's well worth doing. I think it's a great endgame chess piece, especially for this build. The suppression, the ailment being higher makes it easier to craft our boots. It makes it easier for us to cap stun avoid if we want to. So with your endgame chest ready, the only stat you need to look at is this ailment, because we want it at 32%, because it makes a lot of the rest of the stuff we do much cheaper if we can do that. You do have another option though, which we'll go through when we craft the boots, which is Anomalous Grace, because at 20% quality gives you 2% chance to avoid ailments. But if that suddenly goes expensive and it's more than a divine, your other option is just to divine your chest. So if you just want a big chest with ailment avoidance crafted, it's really, really cheap to do it. All you're going to do is buy a fractured suffix of what you want. So let's say you want a tier 2 spell suppression. These are like next to nothing. So I'll just put in this as a rough crafting scenario, in that we have our suppression. We're going to guarantee our life. Then we want either T3 Chaos Res or T3 Dex and an open prefix. We'll start the simulation and then it'll just start rolling through these essences. I'll do Shrieking Essences of Greed. They're about 2.5 to 3 chaos each. So as you can see, it's only costing us around 50 to 60 chaos to hit a chest that we can look at, because it might be worth keeping. So we've got loads of options here that we can look at. So if we stop the simulation, so you just go until you get a base that you're happy with. So I've gone for, you either want Chaos Res or Dex, because they're 2 things that are really beneficial to the build. So if you want a Chaos Res, you'd probably stop once you hit T3. If you wanted Dex, you'd probably stop at like tier 2 and above. So let's say you wanted Dex. We're going to take this base here and we're going to move it across. All you're then doing is crafting your elemental ailments. And that is basically the chest done. It's really, really cheap. It means you're going to have to craft more expensive boots, most likely, and you're definitely going to have to run Anomalous Grace. But overall, you end up with a pretty good chest for next to nothing. Or just look on trade for a 6 link, because you're still going to have to 6 link this chest yourself. So look at the sort of stats you want and put in a 6-link chest and see what comes up. But I doubt you're going to get it for cheaper than 2 divines. And fusions are very, very cheap at the moment. So all you need to do with this craft is you need to keep going until you hit 25, which you hit there. And then if you really wanted to, you could slam your prefix to see if you could hit like some extra evasion. And we hit a tiny bit, but nothing to write home about. And that's the way you do your bog standard chest. You just get a fractured suffix with what you want to aim for. So spell suppression, chaos shreds, whatever you wanted. And then you just spam greed essences and then craft your prefix. So we're going to go and craft the boots. There's 2 pairs. The first one is going to be if you follow the more expensive chest and you've got 30% plus ailments on your chest. First thing to note is you need 32. You can either divine your chest to get 32 or you can run Anomalous Grace to get that 2%. The reason is if we have 32 on our chest or Grace and chest combined, and then we have 20 on the tree, we need to find 48. So 48 minus 25 that you can naturally craft on boots from your bench, we need 23%, which is grand tier of avoid elemental ailments. So once you hit it, you basically just blessed orbit up until you hit 23. Now, unfortunately, I can't do it in here because for some reason it doesn't recognize them as actual implicit. So if we find a blessed orb, it should be grayed out somewhere here. No implicit to effect, but there is, but obviously they've not programmed that. So let's go about how you roll this mod first. Now, I'm not going to say which method you do because both have RNG and both can end up costing you more than it should. You can either roll this just with Grand Embers. They're about 5 chaos a piece. You buy the Embers and you roll it, but it's about 228 chaos to hit this on average. It's essentially a 2.2% chance for you to hit avoid ailments. So you should hit it in 228, but the variance is going to be high because of how many mods there are. So if it ends up costing you double, that's 560 chaos pretty much to hit this mod. So the other way of doing it is you're going to roll it with Graters because they cost a chaos. So we'll swap that to Greater. And then all you need to do is put 1 Exile implicit on it with a Grand because that makes this mod higher. And then we're going to buy Orbs of Conflict, which are 55C each. And we're going to try and elevate it. So I've already done the maths. Each time you fail an Orb of Conflict, it obviously puts the price up because then you have to make a decision. Do I hit another one or do I just re-roll the mod? So this is what I would do. If you want to elevate it up, if it fails and it goes down, re-roll the mod. If you don't fail your Orb of Conflict, the craft costs 101 chaos. So way, way, way cheaper than if you were to roll with Grands. If you fail your first one and then you succeed on your second, it costs 207 chaos. Still cheaper than rolling with Grands. It's if you fail twice and elevate it on the third try, it's 313 chaos. But even then, with variance, I think that's still the better option. However, you are more likely to elevate it than not. So let's just go and we'll Orb of Conflict it up anyway. And it has gone up. So if you get to the point where it knocks it down, just re-roll it with Graters again, which you would do, get it there, and then we'll try and conflict it up again and get to 23. So in terms of crafting the boots, we've already mentioned we can craft the ailment avoidance that we need. So what we're going to do is get a fractured pair of boots with 30% movement speed, and we're just going to use Shrieking Essences of Greed because they're nice and cheap, and we want to re-roll a few times to get decent mods on the boots. When you're rolling, you're essentially looking for T3, T2 spell suppression, whatever you want to aim for. I'd recommend T3, and another decent suffix with an open suffix. That's what we're looking for. So we're going to roll until I see spell suppression. So here we've hit tier 3, which is 9%. If you decide you want 11 to 12, keep going for 2. However, this doesn't have a suffix. So it has the open suffix for us to craft, but then it's a case of us slamming. So your options here are going to be craft your ailment avoidance. You'd want that to go to 25%. And then you can just Exalt Slam and see what you get. And we got an absolute trash tier of T9 decks. However, considering Exalts are like 20 to 22 chaos, and these essences are 2.5, I would just keep going until you actually get a decent suffix along with the spell suppression. So we'll keep rolling. Again, we've hit spell suppression, but again, there's no other suffix. So again, we're going to keep rolling. And as you can see, it's not costing us very much because these essences are less than 3 chaos each. So here, this is probably one where you would risk a slam because it's tier 1 suppression. We've also hit a little bit of evasion on the prefixes. So here again, craft your ailments and then slam. This time we hit tier 5 fire. Not very good, but the pair of boots as a whole are decent. You've got T1 spell suppression, 25% avoidance, 30% movement speed, and 85 life. But let's say you actually wanted either a high resistance, a dex, or a chaos suffix. We'll keep going. So here is a perfect example of what you're looking for. We've only hit tier 3 spell suppression, but it should be enough to get you capped. If it's not, obviously keep rolling. But we've hit T1 cold, spell suppression, T1 evasion, movement speed, and life. So our evasion on these boots is big life, big movement speed, max cold, good suppression, and then we're going to craft our almond avoidance. Keep re-rolling that until you get to 25, and that's your boots done. Really, really simple craft. So now we're going to talk about crafting the pair of boots that you will need if you've gone for the cheaper chest. And these boots will probably end up more expensive in the long run if you want a good pair of boots. It can cost you a lot of money because you're going to be rolling with the most expensive essence available outside the special ones. So let's just talk about how much almond avoidance we have firstly. So we have 25 from the chest, we have 20 from the tree, which is 45, and then we're going to need the implicit of 23%, which to roll that is a grand tier. If you need to know how to do it, check out the beginning of the boots craft before this one, because I go through how to roll the implicits. So you got your 23 plus your 20 plus your 25. You're looking at 68% almond avoidance so far. The issue with that is we need to roll with deafening essences of loathing, and they hit 31 to 35. So there is a chance if you hit the 31 roll, you're only 99% almond avoidance, and that's pointless having because you're going to get chill ground and shock ground affecting you. You can either accept that and say, well, if I hit the 31, I'll just roll again until I hit with my next essence. If you really want to guarantee it, swap your normal grace gem to anomalous grace, get it to 20%, that gives you 2%. That pushes us over the threshold, so we now will hit with every essence. However, if that gem is 1 divine or more, I would just accept that you might have to re-roll if you hit the lowest tier of ailments. So what are we crafting and what are we looking for? Now this takes into account, you have your T2 suppression on your body armor. We're going to go on to gloves next. You're going to have T2 suppression on that. And you're also going to roll greater spell suppression implicits on your gloves. What that means is that any tier of spell suppression on these boots is good enough to cap. And the reason we need to go as low as possible is the higher tier we need, the much more expensive these boots are going to be to craft. So let's assume you didn't go anomalous grace, so we can't accept 31%. We'll craft the boots. What you're going to need to do is roll with deafening essences of loathing, and they are about 12C each. What you're looking for is essentially just any tier of spell suppression and an open prefix. You can't really be picky about these boots because even to get that combination is 12 to 13 essences, and at 12C per essence, it can really get expensive if you're trying to target certain mods. So all you're going to do, roll with these essences. As long as it is 32% or more on the ailments, you're fine. You need any tier of spell suppression and an open prefix. That's all we're looking for on the boots. So we're going to roll until we hit spell suppression and an open prefix. And then the only other thing is we don't want to roll life on the prefix unless it's a half decent tier, because that's what we're looking to craft. So here's a good example. We hit spell suppression straight away with an open prefix, but it has rolled 31%. So without anomalous grace, we're not capped. As I said, you could go and buy that gem, but you will be cheaper just to roll these again because you're very unlikely to hit 31% a second time. So we'll keep rolling again, looking for spell suppression. There, we've hit it. We've hit max tier ailment avoidance, tier 2 spell suppression, and a very small roll of chaos resistance. This suffix honestly doesn't matter. You're going to have to spend so much money to actually target something on here. So all we're doing with this is we're going to craft life from the crafting bench. Keep re-rolling it until it's a half decent tier, so 69. And then if you wanted to, you can slam an Exile on to hope to get a big evasion roll. We got a terrible roll, but it's worth it for the 22 chaos that an Exile is. So that's how you craft in the boots. Spam your deafening essences of loathing until you hit any tier of suppression, open prefix without junk life, and that's essentially it. And then just double check that your ailments is not 31%. You're good to go. With these boots and the gloves, you're going to be capped for ailments and you're going to be capped for suppression. So we'll move on to the gloves, and I'm going to be really quick with these because they're a simple craft. The implicits I would go for are spell suppression and attack speed. If you can afford higher level mods, then Rage on Hit is better, or Intimidate on Hit is also good, but I would go between Rage on Hit and attack speed. So for these gloves, because we want to try and basically get sort of 12% suppression on gloves, boots, and chest, I would recommend fracturing spell suppression gloves. If you can get slink gloves, great. If you get them a tier lower, whatever the gloves further down, it's not too much of an issue. Tier 2 spell suppression, I think I bought a pair fairly cheap. They were like 10C. If they go up and up and up, then look for a different fracture and then just try and roll spell suppression. But for this example, we'll just say you've got these fractured gloves. All we're looking to do is roll this with life essences until we get a good suffix, and then we can either craft a suffix or a prefix. I'd recommend having an open suffix or a prefix because there's really good crafts on gloves. You've got crit chance and LE damage as a suffix. You also have a focus craft on here, which is a silly amount of attack speed on your focus, 31 to 36%. And on the prefix, you've got a damage with flasks, which is also really good. So I would look for a pair of gloves that isn't full because we've got really good crafting potential on a pair of gloves. So all you're going to do for these gloves is spam Essences of Greed to force life. Wait until you get a decent suffix and either an open suffix or an open prefix, and then craft. So we'll just keep rolling until we get a suffix that I'm happy with. So T2 Chaos Resistance, definitely happy with that. Hit tier 1 lightning damage, which is never a bad thing, and life. So your options here, craft your suffix of your crit and LE, or craft your prefix of your flask, and then slam. What I would probably do, because we have both a suffix and a prefix, is I would craft the flask one because you're going to more likely hit a decent suffix than a prefix. Your prefix is going to be something like evasion or life. So if you want defenses, craft your suffix, slam your prefix. If you want to maybe look for extra resistances, attack speed, dex, accuracy, craft your flask mod, and then you'll just stick an Exalt on the gloves. And we've hit an accuracy mod, which is never a bad thing because it's hard to hit with omniscience. So let's just assume we went the other way around. And then we crafted our critical strike, an elemental, which is here. And then we would slam the prefix to try and get something to boost up our defenses. So again, we take an Exalt and we slam it. And we hit 101 flat evasion. So this pushes the evasion of the gloves up. It's up to you which way round you do it. But that's really how you craft the gloves. If you didn't want suppression, just get something else, fractured, maybe chaos resistance. Roll the same way with life essences. The reason we're not rolling with a suffix essence is because it's then very unlikely that we're going to have an open suffix because we're essentially forcing 2 onto the item. So now we're going to go onto the rings, and I'm going to show you how to craft a ring like this really easily and not too expensive. So essentially the base wants to be an amethyst ring with catalyst modifiers on it, which you can put on yourself, and which will be attributes. I think they're called intrinsic. Yep, these intrinsic ones here, get that to 20%. These rings are quite expensive because everyone wants chaos resin. Having an implicit of 23% is an easy way to get chaos resistance. These at the moment are between 3/4 of a divine to a divine for like a T3 fractured roll. And you want either fractured strength, intelligence, or dex by whatever is the cheapest. If they're super, super expensive, I would consider dropping down to tier 4, but any lower, I would look for a different ring and maybe try and get chaos res elsewhere. But for the purpose of the video, let's assume that you can get these fractured rings for a reasonable price. And we are going to have a ring at the end of it that's probably worth 5 to 6 divines on the market. So once you've got your ring, you're then going to go and essence spam. We're going to be rolling whatever essence we don't have fractured. So we've fractured strength, so we're going to roll with intelligence or dexterity. So I'm going to use sorrow to force on dex, and I'm looking for T3 intelligence or higher. The odds of hitting that, if we go into Craft of Excellence and have a look, is 36 essences. And most of the time you're going to have an open prefix, which is the only thing we need to continue the craft. So as you can see, this is 180 cows to roll this based on POE Ninja prices. It might be up to 200, 220 bulk buying, but it's still, I think, really good value for getting what's going to be an insane ring at the end of it. So you would just roll your essences until you hit intelligence. And also, while I'm doing it, keep an eye on the number of prefixes because it is very rarely filling up. I think I missed a good roll. I missed T1. So on this ring, we have open prefixes, which is good. And we have godly suffixes here. This would be an insane ring. So you've got your 3 suffixes. Now you want to do suffixes cannot be changed because we definitely don't want them to go anywhere. And then we're going to Veiled Chaos. And what you have to hope this doesn't do is fill your prefixes. And this is the first time it's happened to me in a very long time. Now, this is probably a good thing to come up. It has filled the prefixes, which means we can't do our channeling cost. We also cannot block half of the unveils that we don't want. So realistically, what we're going to do here, if we can't unveil life, we're going to try and annul off a prefix, which is a 3 in 5 chance, and then we're going to repeat the craft. These suffixes are too good to just craft away. So we're going to unveil. We haven't hit life. We've hit mana, cold, and lightning. These are all rubbish mods. So now, because we're full, we're going to need to annul. And we have our fracture mod. So we're 3 out of 5 chance to annul off something that's in our favor. And we rolled off intelligence. So we would have to craft again now. And that's 2 divines down the pan. That's why you can't buy these rings for like 4 divines, because you need to take into account that every now and again, your Vowed Chaos is not going to work. So let's just reset that. And let's do it until we annul off the correct mod. So there we go. We've got our open prefix again. So then you just do the exact same craft again and again with Veiled Chaos Orb in. This time we've been more lucky. However, this mod sucks. We want to unveil life and we can't. And this kind of bricks our item to an extent. All it means is instead of rolling 55 life, you're going to roll 20. The normal process would be we would craft mana, and that blocks nearly everything else other than life and 3 LE damage rolls. Because of this, you've now got 2 options. Do you want mana on the item, or do you want flat elemental damage? And honestly, an omniscience build, mana's probably better, so we're just going to unveil it as is. So then we have our 60 mana here, which we're going to take, and then you're going to craft non-channeling skills. So this was, again, a very unlucky outcome that hasn't happened to me in game, but it can happen. So all you would do is craft your non-channeling skills and the ring is done. It is not the most amazing ring in the world, but I really don't think it's worth recrafting that ring because of how good our suffixes are. So yes, our life is disappointing, but we still ended up with our mana craft. We also ended up with some flat mana, which for Omni is never a bad thing. And we've got these huge suffixes. So we'll just do one more example of that, because everything that could go wrong on that went wrong. And I don't want you to think that's the average craft process. Normally, these crafts just go without a hitch. So we'll go again, and then we'll wait till we get intelligence. So we're just going to assume that this is a big tier of intelligence. And then we'll do the craft again. So we have our open prefix. So again, its suffixes cannot be changed. Again, we're going to Veiled Chaos. And again, we've hit kind of what we want. We've got an item that doesn't have full mods. Now we're going to do the blocking part where we craft mana. The lowest tier is fine. It's literally just there for a blocker. And then we're going to unveil. And as I mentioned, when you block mana, it leaves 4 mods. 3 double LE damage mods and a life mod. So 80 to 85% of the time, you're going to unveil life. So we're going to go and unveil, and we got our life. Now what you do is you replace the mana craft with non-channeling skills. And then you're basically going to slam an X on it to see if you can get another prefix. And we got T9 Energy Shield. But that's the way you would craft the ring. So we've now got 58 life on the ring. We've got our non-channeling craft, but obviously you'd want that to -7. And then we would have big suffixes, assuming this was actually a proper roll. So that's how you craft the rings. Super easy. The only other thing to point out is triple attribute rings are really good, but I would definitely settle on chaos. If I rolled chaos with my essences and it was a high resistance, I would definitely settle on that. If you're struggling with resistances, if you hit all LE res, it might be something to keep. But overall, most people just go for triple attribute rings. So let's talk about the belt. Now, after looking into this belt more closely, I don't think it's worth spending the money getting this belt. To get a big life roll and 2 double attributes or an attribute in chaos res is actually very, very rare with essences. You're probably talking 1.5 divines if you get lucky, up to 3 divines if you don't. The base is going to cost you 1 to 2 divines, which gives you a belt for 5 divines. That is good, but it doesn't offer you as much as it looks like. So what I would recommend, which we're going to go through in Craft of Exile, is a heavy belt with fractured T2 or T1 strength, and then we're going to roll to force dex and wait until we get massive life and an open prefix. Now you will lose some Omni, which will go through in Path of Building, but not a huge amount. And I think considering the heavy belt will cost you less than a divine to craft, it saves you 4 divines, which I think are better spent elsewhere on the build. For example, that would probably get you both your Divergent inspiration. So first we're going to go on to trade and have a look at these belts, and there is absolutely hundreds of them for next to nothing. And as you can see, you can pick up a T1 base for 8 chaos. I'm pretty sure there was some down here. Yeah, that's fractured, corrupted. Here's one for 5C, a T1 base. This is all you need. You need a fractured heavy belt. I would try and get one with max roll because you're going to have to roll it yourself otherwise, but it's not the end of the world. So this one we are going to get up to 35. and then we're ready to craft. So it's rare, we've got our fractured strength, and then what we're doing is rolling dexterity essences until we hit big life. Now it's actually only 15 essences to hit T2 life on average, and then all we're looking for is a prefix to craft our elemental damage with attacks, but crafting this belt should be way less than the divine, so if you want to go further and try and get maybe some other stats on the belt that help, then I'd certainly recommend doing it. So we will go until we hit at least T2 life. So it cost us 17 essences. We've hit big life. We've got our intelligence, strength. Unfortunately, we've got this duff mod here. But for now, the belt's actually not too bad. Like, all you could get here is a resistance. So if you wanted to keep rolling, you can, but we have it T1 life, so I think it's worth just saying this belt is finished as it is. So you're just going to make sure it's got intrinsic catalyst on it. So we now get 62 intelligence and 69 strength, 93 life, and then you can craft either armor or elemental damage with attacks. I would do elemental damage with attacks if you want more DPS. And then you would just recraft it until you get something that's 30% or more. So now we're going to go over and finally talk about the quiver. Now, it's very difficult to guarantee a really good quiver without spending a lot of money. In my budget video, I recommended buying a Fractured plus on Arrow base because they were about a divine at the time. They're now 4. If I recommend it again in another video, they're probably going to go up to like 5 or 6, and they're just not worth it when it's probably not going to be your end game quiver because you might not be able to get the base you want. So for now, as with the bow, we're forgetting about additional arrows. What I'd recommend is buying a Fractured Crit Multi Suffix T1 on any base that's decent. So Primal Arrow Quiver's good, Feathered Arrow Quiver, Heavy Arrow base. There's quite a few good bases. As long as it's something that benefits the build, you should be fine. Because we're going to try and make the craft as cheap as possible. So what you're doing when you roll, you're using Essences of Dread to guarantee projectile speed. And then what we're looking for is one big prefix, full suffixes, and then we're going to try and annul the random suffix off. So let's just roll a bow. So we've hit our 3 suffixes. Let's say these were prefixes that we wanted to keep. Let's just remove this here. Sorry, my cat's joined us. So this is kind of the thing that you're looking for, but with this being a good mod. So let's remove this, and then we'll add on something like, I cannot see at all. So we're going to add T1 Phys damage to attacks, and we're going to pretend this is what we've hit. So this is kind of the quiver that you're looking for. You're nearly always going to need to annul because you're very rarely going to have an empty suffix because we're forcing 2 onto the item. If you do have an empty suffix, your prefixes might be full of junk. This is the best kind of scenario that you're looking for. So this, you'd want it to be either life, damage with bows, Phys damage to attacks. A T1 early roll is not terrible, but it's not as good as this. And we're essentially looking to annul off the lightning resistance. So we've failed, so we're going to go again until we get another example. So here's another one. Life is not amazing, but I still think, considering you're going to be slamming life, if you don't hit it, mid-tier is not the worst thing in the world. Again, we're trying to null off fire resistance. We missed. So we go again. And as you can see, you're going to hit something that's half decent a lot of the time. So here, I think this is worth annulling as well because we've got big life. And I'll explain why when we actually get to the craft. We missed, so we go again. Here, again, very, very good quiver. We've got T1 life, T1 prod speed, T1 multi and accuracy. Again, we've got a 1 in 3 chance to annul off the accuracy. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go until we actually, in fact, we'll just remove the accuracy. So let's say you finally hit your annul and you've got your 3 prefixes. What you're doing is you're rolling cannot roll attack mods. Now what this does when you slam is there's only 2 prefixes that don't have an attack mod on a quiver, and it's life and damage of bows. So even if we didn't have life, we can force it. But the good thing about having it is we've already guaranteed our tier. So what we're going to do now is Exalt Slam, and we're guaranteed damage with bows. Because this quiver is already pretty decent, if we don't hit like one of the bottom 2 tiers, this is a quiver that we're going to carry on and finish. So we'll go and Exalt Slam, and we've hit tier 5. I would honestly be looking for T4 and up. So here, even though we're not very likely to remove this, we're going to annul because if we save it, we can slam again. We didn't. So now we carry on. It's up to you whether you accept this tier of damage of bows. I think it's not high enough. And since we're going to get a craft very regularly with this method, we're just going to carry on. So we're going to remove this because we won't be able to essence with it. And we're going to carry on. We've just hit exactly the same again. So again, let's say we remove this. You're going to do cannot roll attack mods, which is a divine every time you do it. And then we're going to slam it in as well. This time we hit tier 4. And this is, I would be looking for tier 4 up. on the bow, and then I'd be happy with this because we have T1 multi, T1 prod speed, T4 damage to bows, and then this T2 life that we had roll naturally. You're then replacing... Apologies, the cat is making this very difficult to do because she is right on the keyboard. So this you're going to replace with Frenzy and Crit Strike chance on the crafting bench. And then we're left with one prefix that we're going to slam and hope for a good mod. And we hit an average lightning damage to attacks, but it's better than nothing. So this quiver would be perfectly good for this build. You've got life, damage your bows, little bit of lightning, max prod speed, max crit multi, and then your crit chance and frenzy. And that brings us to the end of the video. I don't think I've left anything out. If I have, I'll put it in the notes or I'll put it in the video description. It was a really long video to put together. It took a couple of days to do it. So it may be that I've missed something out fundamental. So please let me know in the comments if that's the case. If you do like this sort of content, give me a thumbs up and subscribe. It massively helps. Again, if you dislike it and let me know why, and I'll try and improve it for next time. I'm hoping to bring out more guides like this, but it's obviously going to be less frequent because it takes a long time to put together, because I want to make sure the build is 100% right before I release a guide. Thank you very much for sticking with me through the video. I hope you all enjoy the build. Take care and see you in the next one.